What is going on, everybody? This is Two Lock Sports. It is Friday the 13th, and I am here going to give you guys a quick little YouTube show, walk you through a little bit of the tools on DraftManager today, really as it dives into this slate. I got picks and pivots out a couple hours ago, obviously, as a first look. We've been talking about this stuff in the articles. We've been talking in the Slack chat. With everybody, and it's just been unbelievable to kind of see the discussion that we have so early on each day. So I thought it would be a little bit helpful to also walk you through the DraftManager tools and how you can kind of use them to build your roster. Sometimes just talking through the plays in isolation don't always necessarily hit home. So I think actually seeing how you build a roster and talking through the roster construction will make things a lot better and kind of help you guys out. For those of you who've really been with us now for the last couple weeks at DraftManager, I can't say, I know I speak for the rest of the crew when I say thank you guys so much. It's been an absolute blast getting you guys going. The screenshots, waking up to those every day in the NBA chat has just been incredible. Seeing every possible bankroll, every possible contest size across FanDuel, across DraftKings, across Fantasy Draft. It's been a treat to watch this each day. Everyone, jumping in and with their comments, talking about just generally how everyone just feels like they're getting better. That's why we do this. That's why we started this. And so we really appreciate it. So hopefully this will be a helpful little show for you guys today. We'll have our DraftKings article out today, and we'll also have our FanDuel article out later, closer to lock. But the whole team will be over in the Slack all day today talking about this slate, and it's a great one. So let's jump in. So if we jump over into the DraftManager page, we'll click on the NBA page and just kind of walk you guys through just some first thoughts, right? So the very first thing that I would do is every single day, I'm going over into our cheat sheet. And as you guys know, I primarily play on Fantasy Draft, but everything I'm going to talk about today, both the plays and the roster construction, a lot of it you can apply across either of these sites. So if you open up our cheat sheet today, one of the first things that I always like to do is look first to see if any plays are popping from a point per dollar perspective. The very first thing that you're going to notice is Marquise Chris is absolutely jumping off the page from a projection perspective. And that's really very simply due to the fact that you've got both Draymond and Pascal out tonight. As much as it's a little bit terrifying to go into the day knowing that Marquise Chris could be chalk and he could have 6 fouls in 4 minutes and you'd be tilting your face off. It's a really difficult spot to overlook. He's played Utah already twice this year. He's had, if I remember correctly, it was like 22 and 25 fantasy points in those 2 games. Our projections here are showing him closer to 30, and they've got him on a 30-minute projection. So, if you look at what he did last game versus New York, 36 fantasy points. I mean, the upside is there. There is a floor. So, this isn't one of those spots where I think you can just lock and load without thinking through it. But, it's definitely something we have to look at. The next guy you're going to see is DeAnthony Melton. And I talked about this a lot in picks and pivots. And this is really where I wanted to focus. When you look right away, you're going to see guys from Memphis are going to be popping today, right? We got Memphis and Milwaukee. And what you don't see yet on here is any Milwaukee news as it relates to Giannis potentially sitting. Once that is confirmed, if it happens, my guess is you're going to see this change drastically, like we saw on Wednesday, where once the news broke that he would sit, the projections for guys like Middleton and Bledsoe spiked. Ersan became one of the best point per dollar plays. He was popping at a similar 4+ projection, 4+ multiplier projection, and ended up hitting that with ease. So, this is a great first start for you guys. And I want to walk just into the optimizer now. For you guys that, maybe don't have, maybe you just have the monthly special, you just got the weekly package. All those are great. And you can use the cheat sheets. You can use the Slack chat to really help improve your game. The optimizer is an add-on both for the weekly and for the monthly packages, but I can tell you that for myself and for a lot of the folks, we've gotten incredible feedback about just how much this helps. And I wanted to walk through it because I think there's and I'll be honest, I said this before to folks, but the way to think about the optimizer, it's not just for people who MMA. I do not. I play one lineup a night. For anyone who's ever talked to me about lineup construction, I hand build my lineup and I do one lineup a night. So I have to be honest that I had never used an optimizer before we rolled this out with DraftManager, and I wasn't entirely sure that I would ever need one, being a one lineup a night kind of guy. But what I can tell you is that it really has changed my process and improved my process, and I'm seeing that in terms of my ROI and how my bankroll has improved steadily as a result, because it really helps you think through plays, maybe in ways just hand building or clicking through the app or the desktop screen on whatever site you play for. It's not going to necessarily be the same thought process. So I wanted to walk you through two things, and really how I'm approaching this slate and how you can approach it. So the very first thing that I wanted to do was talk about Milwaukee and Memphis. And I mentioned it before, it's going to pop in the cheat sheets. It's going to be a popular spot today. It's the second highest projected pace game. And realistically, everything changes when and if we get the news that Giannis is out. We already know on the Memphis side that Morant and Clark are going to be out. So you've got a lot of news there already. I wrote this up today, but I think that this game looks and feels very similar to what we saw on Wednesday with the Pelicans and the Bucks, where you've got two teams, fast pace. You've got injury news on both sides that condenses the rotation, puts a lot of usage on a small group of guys, and really makes things very, very easy to build around. Now, it was chalk on Wednesday. It will likely be chalk again tonight. It was the chalk that you needed to eat on Wednesday, and I'm going to argue it's the chalk that you need to eat again tonight. Assuming the news breaks like we expect, right? So what I wanted to do was to give you an idea of how to build lineups kind of with that construct. So when you go into the optimizer, right, the easiest thing that I will do is if you have a game in mind that you want to focus on, what you do is you click on game filters, right? All the games are going to pop up because right now this has got everything in our player pool. If you deselect them and then let's just click on Milwaukee and Memphis. So now it brings up all the plays and it sorts them high to low based off projection. Now, what you'll notice here is it's got Giannis in here at a 37 fantasy point projection, which would be far, far lower than his average on the year of 58. So, it's got him in still, but not, coming in nearly as we would expect. So you're going to have to play around a little bit with this in order to make it work. But the best thing to do, when you look through this is just get an idea of what the projections are showing you. And I mentioned this today, with this game to me feels like a great game stack where you can build a core of guys that all are going to sit in that 30 to 40 fantasy point range. We've seen it already. If I look at these projections, Jonas at 42 and Jaren Jackson at 35, that feels right. I based off of what they've done in previous games where Morant has been out with the fantasy point per minute production that they've got, that feels about right. Giannis in here at 37, I'm just going to X him out of my player pool. I don't want him there. I'm going under the assumption, at least in this exercise, that he's not there. If that's the case, I don't think then that Bledsoe and Middleton's projections are necessarily high enough. So what you can do is you can up them in here, with any projection you want. So you can type right into my projections, go in here and type in whatever number you want for either of these guys and run it through. But for the sake of this, I'm just going to leave it just so you guys can see. But you can, another example right down here is Ersan, 20 fantasy point projection. If Giannis is out again, this is a guy who just hit for 30. So you can up these and play around with it, right? So if you go in, let's just say we want to lock in a core of Jonas, Triple J, Middleton, Bledsoe, and let's go with Ersan just as an idea. So you've got that 5-man core. You can absolutely put in more if you want, if you want a game stack, but this is a great way to kind of start your day. get an idea of what builds would look like. So you hit generate lineups. It's going to default. Oh, what did I do? Oh, let's go back here because now it is telling me. There we go. Why not work? Okay. Oop, I hit the wrong button. So, all right. I don't know why I just did that, but we can. There's another way you can do this too. I'm not sure why it just kicked me back out to the main screen. But you, instead of clicking on game filters, you can also click on the teams themselves, right? And you can just go over into each game. My guess is that it kicked me out because it's probably just updated the projections as I'm in the middle of showing it to you. So if we go back in, right, go Jonas, Triple J, and go down here. Let's get Middleton. Let's get Bledsoe. Let's X out Giannis and Ersan. Okay, there we go. So what this is going to do, it defaults to showing you 3 lineups just as ideas. And again, I don't think that you should just blindly play optimizers. I mean, I understand the appeal of it and the relative ease of it, but I don't necessarily think that that's the way that I would go. I like using it for exactly how I just showed you. Early in the day, especially before we have all the news, you can lock in a core of guys and just run this throughout the day and leave this locked and come back periodically and check. What it'll do is it'll tell you, and it might even do it while we're in here, it'll pop up and tell you that projections have been updated. So one of the things that you can do is leave this and leave the different optimals in here. You can go up to 300 lineups if you want. But what you can do is throughout the day, go in and constantly keep looking at how the projections refresh around your core, right? So if we're going into the day, assuming that Giannis is out and we want to go with, some sort of core stack of this game, and I think that these 5 are the right, at least core initially. I think you can expand it to a full game stack. If you want to grab guys like Brooks or Crowder or either of the point guards on Memphis, but I think the Milwaukee side's pretty clear. It was the chalk 3 guys on Wednesday. I think it's the chalk again tonight. But what it's showing you here is now just ideas, right? And you're going to see here in your player pool, it'll run through different options, and it's giving you a variety of different guys. Lou Will is popping, and I talked a little bit about him today with Patrick Beverley already being ruled out. We saw Lou Will got a lot of that run when Beverley checked out against Toronto. We saw earlier in the year where Lou Williams actually started a game that Pat Beverley was out. It's a little bit apples and oranges in that Kawhi and Paul George weren't both active for that game, so you have to take that into account when you're looking at the box scores of the game logs. But he's popping here tonight, at a mid-tier price. Him and Trez, both from a Clippers perspective, you see here, are projecting really well. And, if you look here at D'Angelo Russell, right, he's projecting really highly. Again, another strong mid-tier play with Draymond out, basically everything flowing through him. This gives you an idea. And if you kind of look at how this is playing out, I would argue, this is telling you have a projected score right now of 298. On Fantasy Draft, we hear this a lot. The multiplier perspective. We were used to 5 and 6Xs if you play on FanDuel or DraftKings. On Fantasy Draft, you're looking at a 3X to 3.5X. And what I mean by that is you have $100,000 worth of salary. Typically, the minimum cash line's around 300. Typically, winning GPP scores are around 350. There's not, a black and white. It can change on a nightly basis, obviously, but every day in my article, I always look back and just try and touch on what they ended up being. And we tend to see 300 to 350. So, if you're looking at, that min cash or more cash game perspective, you're thinking more around 300. So you're thinking 3X multipliers or 3.5, to get up to 350. So, if you look at what this is projecting, this is right at 300 right now. So the question I always have is, if I use this lineup, do I have a path to 350, right? So what you're talking about now is another 50 fantasy points. Now, I would argue that Ersan at 20, you could probably get 10 more out of him. I think both Bledsoe and Middleton are more like 40-point projections on a night like tonight. So just there, if I bump these guys each up to 40 and I bump him up to 30, right away I'm adding another 20 points. So now I'm at 320. The question is, do you have anybody else that you would want to toggle or think that they've got more upside? Everyone else feels kind of right. The one thing I talked about, there you go, projections have updated. So now you can rerun some projections. Now the optimal one stayed the same, but it looks like actually this one changed. But we'll touch on that in a second. So this gives you an idea of how this moves. One of the things I talked about in picks and pivots today, and I used it on Wednesday with a lot of success. I finished 12th overall in the pick and roll on fantasy draft. And I went with a game stack concept of the Bucks and the Pelicans. And I think you could do something similar tonight with the Bucks and Memphis. The problem with that game is everyone in that game feels like they're all great for 30 to 40 fantasy points, which is strong. It builds you a great floor. I think you have a clear path to 300. What you don't have is that one guy that you think can go off. And even when I look at this is way more of a balanced, optimized build, right? You're going with more optimized plays. And what you're lacking, though, are guys that, can go for the 60, 70 fantasy point game. That's why I want to show you what the optimal 2 is, because I think while it's not one that I had thought of, I think this is where the optimizer becomes very valuable. So same 5-man core. We have Chris in here as arguably the best point per dollar value on the slate. And then what it's giving you is 2 what I would consider really high upside ceiling kind of plays with Trae Young and Kawhi. Both of those guys are already projected for 50. Easily, both of those guys could go for 60 plus. So you're talking about a little bit more upside from these guys, I think, in this kind of build. I wanted to go back to the player list because there was one way that I wanted to talk a little bit too about how you could build this. So right now it's sorted by teams. If you click on the projections, it'll list high to low on the projections. What I did on Wednesday was I built a game stack around Milwaukee and Memphis, and then I used James Harden as my one-off. I was honestly a little bit shocked that on a slate with, so much value, he was less than 10% owned. He went for 80, and then with the stack, kind of building a nice floor around him, it was an easy position to win in. And I was within the top 10 to top 15 all night of the standing. So it was a great strategy then. I think you can employ it again here tonight. So I've already got all my other guys locked. So now if I add Harden and now I hit generate lineups, right now I've added him to my lock. So I've now locked 6 of the 8 guys, right? So I think what you're going to end up seeing, which is what exactly you see, is you're going to see Chris becomes the obvious pairing. So in just, if I do 3 lineups, it's telling me in all 3 I should use Chris and pair him with Harden. And that's not surprising, right? You have the highest price guy, the highest ceiling guy in Harden. And the way to get there is to pair him with the punt value that has the high multiplier. So, in both of these instances, you've got Chris locked into the lineup, and then they're running some different options for you. So they've got TJ Warren, they've got Dylan Brooks, and they've got Alec Burks. And, if you look at how this build works, I think you could argue all of these plays. TJ Warren's probably more of a cash guy, so that's probably not someone as a GPP player I would look towards. So I'd probably end up Xing him out and just seeing what we rerun. So now it's running Dylan Brooks. So again, if you wanted to go full on game stack, run this now with 3 Grizzlies, 3 Bucks, Harden, and Chris. I think that's a really viable build. I don't think that this projected score is high enough. I bet you if we locked in on this as the day goes on, you'll see that increase. Once if we get the Giannis news, I think you'll see that go up. So this is one option. The other option here, if you want a little bit of a different correlation, you don't want to go all in on one stack. This is something actually that Thunder Dan and I were talking about in the Slack the other day was, we looked back at my lineup that finished 12th, and I had went full on game stack with Harden. And he made a comment and he said, what you did there was you built this solid floor, but what is difficult is when you go all in with, say, 7 guys from one game, the chances of you getting 7 ceiling games becomes harder and harder. So while you might want to do a core of, say, 4 to 5 in a stack, going all in may actually limit your ceiling. So, here in this example, it's looking a little bit more like a full-on game stack, but now in Optimal 2, this takes you in a different approach. It builds you the same exact core, of the $3 with Harden, but now what it does, in addition to Chris, it's giving you more Golden State exposure. Again, a game that, with Draymond out, with Pascal out, Bowman's in the G League, so there's not a lot of offensive options. So to me, this becomes a very interesting pivot off of that. And you can now kind of correlate with these 2 Warrior guys. And again, build yourself something different. So I wanted to, just kind of walk you guys through that in 2 different ways, both if you just went with the core or if you, added on a guy like Harden. To give you guys just an idea of how I'm looking at it. Listen, I'm doing this. I write my articles every day at 5, 6 in the morning. I'm doing this and it's not even noon on the East Coast. So things are going to change. Things will change as they always do. I don't know. I mean, a superstar could get scratched. Somebody could eat an avocado and their eye could explode. It's the NBA. We don't know what's going to happen. So hopefully this is helpful for all you guys listening. If you're not already signed up for Draft Manager, please come give us a try. Just head on over to Draft Manager. Click if you want to click on the NBA. If you just want NBA, we've got weekly passes. Right now they're $5. We've got the monthly pass, which is $9.99. I mean, it's an unbelievable deal. You can add on the optimizer. You can jump into Slack with us and talk NBA all day. I want to keep seeing those screenshots rolling in. So thank you guys for sharing those with us. The feedback so far has been phenomenal. And let's keep killing it. Have a great Friday, guys. We'll see you soon. Peace.